Because how could you accept... Imagine being a parent that has been brainwashed into this, and then you just haven't looked deep into it enough, maybe, or maybe, you know, the social pressure has just got to you a bit, and then you find out, yeah, you have rendered your child infertile, and they grow up, they want to have children, they can't because of decisions you allowed them to carry through. That's going to be a hard thing to come to terms with, almost virtually impossible. University was supposed to be the place where ideas were tested, and instead it became an echo chamber. Now, I count myself lucky that I didn't attend a physical university. I did my studies from home, and I think that was what kind of allowed me to escape the indoctrination. You know, I'm not dumb enough to say that if I had gone to university and gone all through the colleges that I may not have been indoctrinated. You know, I might be stood here today telling a very different story with very different views, but I just count myself lucky that I was able to get out of the system. I think that that's why I was able to differentiate these things. But however, I have spoken to students across the country who describe the same experience that I see online in universities. If you do not perform the correct political rituals, you are socially excluded, gossiped about, and your reputation is quietly destroyed. Debating societies now cancel speakers, and lecturers preface every lecture with land acknowledgements and pronoun declarations. The motto of inclusion turns out to mean inclusion for only those who already agree. Traditional views on sex, on family, on the nation, and on free speech itself mark you as an outcast. And I felt that isolation intensely. I didn't really have any friends my own age, and still not many, to be honest. And there were periods where I kind of looked around at people my own age and wondered if I was the only one who still believed that reality is not optional, that two sexes exist, and that children cannot consent to sterility. That a society which prioritises itself on feelings over facts will eventually have neither safety or freedom. The loneliness was real, and it still is for many young people who hold these views in silence because the cost of speaking is just too high. The isolation could have driven me inward, but luckily for me, it drove me outward instead. In October 2024, I went to my first protest. Never been on a train on my own, let alone to London. I was born and raised in a tiny little village in the West Midlands. Never really been to a city. I couldn't even take a 20-minute train to Worcester, if anyone knows where that is, on my own. Just couldn't do it. So all of a sudden going to a massive protest in London was terrifying. And I had a massive panic attack the morning before I left, and I wasn't going to go. And my mom said, because she knew how much I've been talking about it for months and months and months, and she says to me, she goes, "You're meant to go." So I went, and I got interviewed there, and in the interview I said that I wanted to be a journalist, and within 3 weeks I was interviewing MPs and politicians and covering protests and speaking to people with just such wonderful stories and heartbreaking stories as well that I would never have known had I not dared to leave the house that day. I covered farmers' rallies when the proposed inheritance tax changes threatened to destroy family farms and stop them from being passed down to the next generation. I platformed stories of the victims of the so-called COVID vaccine. I worked with ex-veterans to get their fellow ex-servicemen off the streets. I faced intimidation and violence and stood my ground at protests and been assaulted by men in dresses. As I said, I've interviewed MPs and protesters and people I would have never, ever have met, and that's just something that kind of keeps me going. Like all of you here, I mean, I've spoken to so many wonderful people here that are doing such amazing things that no one knows about. No one knows about, especially people in my age group. I mean, no, we're all glued to our phones. Most people my age have never picked up a bloody book in their life. You know, it's infuriating. So coming to places like this, and thankfully there are a lot more young people here than the other freedom festivals I've done, which is really refreshing to see. But there needs to be more, there needs to be more drive once we have the young people who are awake, like those that are here. Okay, we need to turn that into something tangible now. We need to turn that into going out and having conversations, because quite frankly, 90% of my generation needs a good slap in the face with reality. A good slap in the face. I mean, I know that... for example, abortion is still a very sensitive topic, and even among these kinds of communities, there are people who are more pro-choice, there are people who are more pro-life. But one of the things for me, and I know it's a bit gruesome, but I found it by accident. You know, you're just scrolling and you see something horrible. I saw a video of an abortion. That was what did it for me. That was what did it for me. And it started making me thinking that, it started getting me thinking that we should be showing young people what the reality is of these things that they protest about. How many, 16, 17-year-old girls just think that an abortion is a completely nothing procedure that's just so easy? I mean, it's being used almost as akin to contraception now. We just recently had the biggest legislation change on abortion in the UK since 1967, and a baby can now legally be aborted at home, by the way, because the doctor's still liable, so it's a promotion for at-home abortions that won't work. They are being promoted at-home abortions to take abortion pills designed for fetuses up to 11 weeks, and they're saying that if a woman does that for a baby that's due tomorrow, full term, she will face no legal repercussions. Now, to me, that only says one thing. What's the difference between 24 hours between the day before a baby's born and the day after? What will the next legislation change be? Abortion after birth? Do people think that the vaginal canal is the only magical bit that, not a human? Is that what people think? But unfortunately, when I try to speak to people my own age about these things, whether it be the trans ideology, whether it be the net zero madness that Sandy spoke about yesterday, whether it be abortion law, whether it be the vaccine, anything, I get absolutely screamed at, assaulted, things thrown at me. The police do absolutely nothing. I went to a trans protest thing that was outside. It was when they made the Supreme Court decision that men could no longer go into women's spaces, and they were protesting a gym. And I went there, and I didn't even say anything. I was just there holding with the camera, and before I knew it, there was about 4 men who either identified as women or non-binary or whatever else, literally surrounding me, all taller than me, police over there doing nothing. And eventually the police only came over when I snatched one of their signs because it was right here. So that's the kind of institutional bias that we're dealing with, and we see it within the youth because it's coming from the education system, it's coming from social media, and now we have created a generation that effectively polices itself and censors itself way better than any Big Brother system ever could. I mean, I get shut down for having these sorts of views. I would never shut anyone down for coming at me and saying, I actually disagree with a lot of what you said. I'd like to talk about that. Great, let's talk about it. That's what I'm here for, to keep the conversation going, and that's what we all need to be doing. I mean, everyone here who has children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, or just any young people that friends, kids, anyone, you need to be motivating them that now they have the skill of critical thinking. I'm assuming they wouldn't be here if they didn't. Now they have that skill, they need to utilize it. And so many people who I've actually spoken to, and it's usually been away from protest because people do kind of have a mob mentality, but when I've spoken to people on their own, they're much more willing to have a conversation. And you actually do find a middle ground. But you can't do that without saying some uncomfortable truths. And that will it will put you in the firing line sometimes, but that's what it takes. I mean, I'm sure everyone here has had a little bit of experience with that. Put your hand up here if you have at least one family member or friend who thinks that you're nuts or crazy. It's pretty much everyone. I filmed teachers losing their composure completely when I asked her why she thinks that children can consent to puberty blockers. She was at the traffic lights and she was screaming at me, but she wouldn't come over and actually have a conversation. She would only scream from afar. That's the problem. People won't engage. Everywhere the pattern is the same. Ideology first, evidence second, if at all. And the young are the primary targets because they're still forming their sense of self. They're still hungry for belonging and still vulnerable to social pressure. And it's not organic cultural change. As we know, this is an institutionalized capture rolled out by a very specific agenda designed to do exactly this. And it's the same agenda that brings forth all of the other things that we hate, such as the net zero stuff, all the war in the Middle East. I mean, people, are on either side, but just, can we all agree that we just don't want people to die? We don't want anyone to die. We just want peace. But you can't talk about that because you have to choose a side. If you don't choose a side, you're wrong. You are the one who's got wrong think. The same agenda has, by design, left my generation uniquely unprepared for any real hardship or conflict at all, and in a world where World War III is a looming thought at people's minds, it's very clear why that has been done. My entire generation has basically agreed to be medicalised for life, and they don't really know what that means. They don't realise that while they're here saying, you know, oh, we're edgy, we're pushing the boundaries, but I'm going to rely on the state forever for my testosterone. How does that make sense? And as very good old saying goes, hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. I think we're living through the weak men stage, personally. Not saying anyone in here is a weak man, but masculinity itself, again, is another thing that has been vilified. Masculinity is toxic. Feminist, not feminism, but feminist traits and maternal instinct, if you lean into that too much, you must be being oppressed. You must have internalized misogyny. If you're a man who's a man's man and traditional, well, you're toxic. You're toxic, and you should not have an opinion on anything, ever at all. In fact, you should just get rid of your vocal cords, because no one wants to hear your opinion, basically. Is that what you guys feel like sometimes? Yeah. My generation was promised liberation. But instead, what many of us received was a new set of chains. Chains made of language, social fear, medicalisation, and of a constant demand to deny what our eyes can see. The isolation hasn't disappeared, and there are still days where I look at the dominant culture of my age group and feel like a complete stranger. Most of my peers absorbed the agenda script completely, and many will defend it aggressively because their identity, their social status, and their sense of moral superiority rests upon it completely. But I do have hope. The more I go to events like this and I meet more people my own age who do think like me. I can't remember his name. There he is. That young man over there. We were having an amazing conversation the other day. I was very pleased to hear that he is also a critical thinker, doesn't want to put up with any of the crap. Watch my language. And we don't all have to agree on everything. I mean, Sandy, your talk was a perfect example yesterday. It kind of devolved into a debate. I don't know if anyone was here for that. That was interesting. But you know what? That's what we need. That's what we need. Maybe a little less on the aggressive side, but that's what we need. You know, we need to be able to have these conversations. We are not all going to agree on everything. That's impossible. But we do all need to remain based in reality and measurable things that we do know, such as chromosomes. Good example. And we need to really start waking people up to the harsh reality that will be in the years to come if my generation doesn't get their crap together. Because lawsuits will begin to mount from the thousands of young people already waking up to irreversible damage that they've done to their bodies. How many detransition stories have you guys heard? I've heard a lot, and they're awful. These children are victims. Most of them are now in their 20s, some of them their early 30s, and they're getting to the point where they want kids, they want to get married, and they can't. It's heartbreaking. It's utterly heartbreaking. But instead of amplifying those voices and making sure that they are supported and they are heard, the LGBTQ mob tends to treat them as apostates. It's not so inclusive when you really look at it.
They're not inclusive at all.
This ideology is simply not going to vanish, obviously, and for those parents who have medically transitioned their own children, and for the children themselves who was told this is their authentic self, the consequences will stretch across generations, and as I touched upon earlier, it will be almost impossible for any of them to ever really come to terms with what they've done. There will be adults living with sterility, lost sexual function, chronic health problems, and deep regret, while at the same time, there will be a cohort of children born into households where the ideology is practiced as normal. It will be the new traditional. Pronouns will be treated as like a sacred practice. We're already seeing that happen. And this is precisely why it's so urgent to shake the normal, quiet 30% out of their slumber. Give young people the confidence and the smarts to disagree without vilifying each other. And I see it everywhere I go, even in places like these. I did touch upon it, but if you aren't aware, someone actually tried to get Sandy cancelled from speaking here.
No
because
way.
apparently she's a far-right thug. Well,
how did somebody want to do that? I thought it was pretty much
exactly. I mean,
a
personally, I
tight-knit
mean,
community.
don't get me wrong, I don't consider myself right wing. I actually consider myself what would be an old school, you know, I'm anti-vax, I'm pro-environment, not net zero, but like I'm an environmentalist. I would have been called a hippie if I was born in the right era. And in terms of my political views, I actually consider myself quite centrist. But the meaning of right wing has been shifted to encompass more people to further the divide. But even so, with my views, I understand how someone could look at my views and go, she's a bit right wing. But Sandy, I can't see that at all.
It leads to cancelling out, doesn't it? That's the thing.
Exactly.
Since you're right wing, that's it.
That's the cancel. Well, the thing is each side has its own shutdown terms. I've seen groups like this do it amongst themselves as well. I've seen groups on the right wing do it as well. It's like the left shutdown terms, you know, Nazi, fascist, and everything like that, and then the right, their shutdown terms and the freedom shutdown terms tend to be controlled opposition. How many people here have either thought that someone is or have been accused of being controlled opposition? A lot. And I would just like to say, I hope this comes across in the right way, but just on the topic of the debate that happened yesterday, most people in this room could be my parent. Sorry, just an observation.
What are you
But
saying?
what I'm saying is, not you, Trevor. You're about 30, aren't you? It's the beekeeping. But what I'm saying is, please remember that we are the ones that are learning from you and looking at you to teach us how to navigate this insane world. Because we are not looking at the soccer moms who have a 9 to 5, who do everything the government says and go for all their boosters. No, people like me are looking to people like you for answers and for guidance. And if we can't debate amongst ourselves with civil discourse, then what hope does my generation have? With all the hormones they on, I mean, trust me, they are tetchy. I've kind of gone over my thing a little bit, but to cut a long story short, that is exactly why I launched Propaganda, because every time I speak about these things online, you know, I make videos on it, I cover protests, I get called a fascist, I get cancelled, I get shadow banned. I didn't know it was a feature, but someone on Facebook put, I think someone does not recommend Emma Dunwell for misinformation or something like that, because I made a post that actually got flagged on TikTok, pointing out all of the biggest financial backers of the transgender ideology, such as John Stryker, and also, while he's not with us anymore, thank goodness, it's nice to speak ill of the dead, but John Money. Does anyone know who John Money was?
Yeah.
Okay. So John Money is a New Zealand-American psychologist, sexologist, and professor at Johns Hopkins University. He was a paraphilic. I hope that everyone knows what a paraphilic is.
No, what's that?
So someone who is into paraphilia basically means that they're into violent and often dangerous sexual things. And he was also a paedophile. And he is considered one of the grandfathers of the transgender movement, because he was the person who pioneered the ideology of nurture versus nature, and that gender could be taught and it's not innate. And it actually resulted in the suicide of both of those boys that he experimented on, committed sex acts on them, made them do things with each other for his pleasure. And it all started off because one young boy, when he was born, there was a circumcision gone wrong and he lost his penis. So his parents took him to John Money and they asked him if they could, if he could reconstruct it or anything like that. And instead, John Money proposed, how about we raise him as a girl? So there was 2 twin boys, one of them was being raised as a girl. And obviously they went through horrendous abuse, they went through mutilation, all sorts. And they both ended up committing suicide in their 20s, I believe, or early 30s. So this is the kind of, when people say that transgenderism, or it's a grassroots movement of people that have just genuinely believing that they're pushing the boundaries, has maybe just gone a bit too far. No, it's been engineered, it's been institutionalized by design, Otherwise, it wouldn't have got this far. Imagine any of your teachers from when you guys were at school, imagine telling them what schools were like now.
Yeah.
Imagine saying like, oh yeah, there's actually a litter tray in the girls' toilet because we have a cat. She's human, but she's a cat.
Is that really
So
happening?
yeah, it's utterly ridiculous. And this is exactly why I launched propaganda, to get away from the offline vilifying cancel culture, because it's printed, it's there. I can still get cancelled online, but unless you throw a match to that table over there, you ain't getting rid of that. It's already all over the country, it's in people's pockets. It's uncancelable. And that's exactly what other people need to be doing. I was inspired by the light paper. How many fans of the light paper here? Yeah. I was inspired by the light paper to kind of try and create a more magazine version to get younger people involved. So if, as I said earlier, if any of you have, nieces, nephews, daughters, sons, anyone, and you think that this might be something they're interested in, and they're for free speech, they're for debate, and there might be some articles in there that even I don't agree with. You know, that's the whole point of free speech. We are allowed to disagree. So I don't want to ramble for too much longer. I know that we were already running a little bit over time, just to have a little check.
But you did start late.
I did start late, but I don't want to cause any more things. So actually, I was hoping I could open up to a Q&A now, if anyone has any questions. Yeah?
How are we going to stop the gender ideology in schools?
Well, the thing is, stopping gender ideology in schools first needs to begin with the teachers. Just like we have, over the years, institutional biases, like the police. We can't deny that the police absolutely used to be 100% racist. So we have to start with the institutions, because they're the ones who were pouring it into young people's minds. But to a certain extent, I kind of feel like you just need to move away from the institutions entirely. Start taking back your parental control. Stop giving up all of your power to the state and to the internet, and I can't teach my child that, so I'll let someone else do it. No, learn and teach your child. They need it from you. That's what you're there for. Don't hand it off to the state. So hopefully, I think that parents like these and people at these kinds of gatherings impart their knowledge onto the next generation. And I've seen a lot of people my age now, thankfully, who are starting to wake up and who are starting to see, hang on a minute, this isn't right. And I was put on testosterone and everything when I was like 12. I'm 18 now, and I don't want to transition anymore. That feels wrong. So we are seeing the birth of more critical thinkers, but it is a slow process. So unfortunately, it's a fight with the institution.